What's up everyone, it's a Knife Style here, and today I'm going to be doing my full review on the GB2. So I'm going to throw up a couple size comparisons here as I get into this video, and the Spyderco Gayle Bradley 2 has been a knife for me that I really didn't think of it much when I first got it, but I really just put it to work and used it a lot over the last 3 weeks that I've had it, and it has performed very well, so I will get into that when I talk about specifics. But if you look at this blade, it does have some scratches on it. Don't really know if those are going to show up. That's just cardboard and stuff. But yes, this knife has definitely been a user for me, and it will continue to be one. And so just the basic anatomy of this knife, what it consists of. So this knife has an M4 drop point hollow ground blade with a carbon fiber laminate handle scales. It is a liner lock designed by Gayle Bradley, made by Spyderco in Taichung, Taiwan, and it will run you about $171. And by the way, the pocket clip is a 4-way reversible clip. So on to the looks of this knife. Overall, these liners, I think that they look pretty good because they are shadow box. If you don't know what that is, that's basically where the scales are slightly smaller than the liner so that it gives almost like an outline to it. And I think that it kind of makes the carbon fiber laminate pop. So I think that that looks pretty good. Also the blade, I think that this satin finish has a good contrast with this. I call it brushed flat. I'm not really sure what to call it. Now, one thing about this brush part is that when I see rust spots on this M4, it has only been on this brushed part. So it's one of those things where I probably wouldn't have any rust issues if it was just a full satin finish. Don't necessarily know why that is. If you do, please let me know in the comments. But overall, I do think it does look pretty good. And about the rust issue, I have been applying EDCI formula to this because it's one of those things where the rust spots that I have seen on this knife don't look that good. You know, it's not like something like K390 or Maximet that kind of just patinas and darkens over time, and I think that looks pretty good. But this just kind of looks like rust speckles on it, kind of like D2. So it's one of those things where I feel like I'd probably just rather keep it looking brand new. But anyway, onto the blade of this knife. And the blade on this, it's just amazing, and it's probably one of the best blades that Spyderco has ever done. So like I said, it's hollow ground, and this drop point blade shape is one of my most favorite drop point blade shapes that there is. You know, you still have very good access to that belly, and to that tip. You have a nice belly and a lot of flat, and it overall just works really good. My only complaint with this blade is that there is a smile on the plunge, and yeah, that's pretty much my only complaint, which says a lot. And about the fatigued edge from the factory, because pretty much all Spydercos have one. This one did have one, but I actually got it out in one sharpening. With my Spyderco Sage, I'm still trying to work on that, but this knife is very thin behind the edge. Look at that, 10 thousandths, 9 thousandths behind the edge. Let me try and get that to show up. And because it's a hollow grind, I'll even stick these calipers way up the blade and see that it is at 18 thousandths all the way up there. So it's not like a Sabenza where it won't thicken up until way up there, but just even probably after 10-15 sharpenings, this thing will probably still be under that 20 thousandths mark, which is really cool. And one thing that I do like about a hollow grind, if you guys don't know, is that there is much less resistance when cutting, because that I don't have any paper to draw on, but if this was magnified in the cross section, it would kind of look like this. And so basically when you cut material, none of that hits that concave part in there. I think that's the right term. And so basically it's not like a flat grind like this where the material is rubbing on the entire surface of that grind and just basically creating more resistance. So that's why I think that knives with thick stocks and hollow grinds go good together. Also, thin stocks and hollow grinds cut really good too. But it's one of those things where I think that hollow grinds are great, and I wish Spyderco would use more of them. Because even though I have had better experience with their flat grinds as of recent, but it's one of those things where hollow grinds, I feel like, you know, we've seen it with knives like this, knives like the Swayback. They're just very thin, and they do a very good job. Also, for the, I guess, the edge retention torque for M4, I've had a great experience with it. It's one of those things where I'll use it all day, and then I just, a lot of times, I will take a knife, maybe an S30V or something, and usually strop it, but this one I will rarely have to do that, and so there's a lot less maintenance when sharpening, and sharpening, the process was not very hard. I used a $50 work sharp system, and it only took me, I think, 10 to 15 minutes. So it's one of those things where I am very impressed with M4, and this blade is just amazing in general. My only complaint being about that plunge grind right there. Oh, and also, if you haven't noticed, like, it kind of has this belly here, and then it almost goes back a little bit, kind of like a recurve. And the recurve looks a little bit more defined because of that little smile right there. But if I cover that up, it's not much of a recurve. But what it does is if I'm cutting like that, that material will catch in there, and then it'll just catch a little bit on the belly. And so a big complaint I have with drop point blades is it almost seems like when you are doing straight cuts like this, you are just kind of losing blade length. Let me explain that a little bit more for the people who are confused. Look at this ProTech SBR right here. We have pretty much flat, and then I'd say from here on up, it's belly. And so let's say I'm doing a straight down cut. It is going to cut straight down, and then that material will just kind of just rub off on that belly unless I tilt my wrist up like that, and then the belly will actually catch it. So when I cut straight down on this knife, I'm pretty much only using probably this much of the blade to do it, and this is already a small blade. But on this knife, it will catch that a little bit, which actually does really help out. And I believe this blade length is 3.6 inches. So, you know, it's one of those things where this knife, the blade as a whole, is just insanely functional and one of my favorite blades out there. And probably this blade shape is second favorite of mine to the Insingo blade that Chris Reeve uses. So yeah, that's saying a lot for me at least. And I think that whoever gets this knife will really enjoy that blade. So that was a whole lot of talk about the blade. Let's get on to the fit and finish and lockup. So these scales overall look pretty good. I've seen some parts kind of like that almost look kind of ratty, I guess I could say, like around here. That doesn't look the best. But overall, the scales look fine. And then the centering, it looks pretty much on, probably a little bit slightly off to the left. But I've been very impressed with this blade play because there pretty much is none. You know, my test for blade play might be a little bit different than yours. What I do, I pretty much hold right here and then put my hand there and do it. You know, I can pretty much get blade play out of almost every knife that I have if I hold it down here, hold it up here, and just go as hard as I can. So it's one of those things where, like that's pretty much good for me. And also lock rock. This liner lock is so solid. I'm just used to a ton of these, you know, like $40 CGRBs. While they are liner locks that do lock up, they just aren't really that strong. But this one is done very nicely. The lockup there is sitting at around, I'd call it 40-45%. Jared over at Knees Knives, I've seen his and it's kind of moved over a little bit. I have not had that issue at all, so I don't really know what's causing that. It could just be the lock face geometry on it just isn't as angled as mine is. I'm not entirely sure, but it's one of those things where maybe in the EDC update, after I carry this for a couple months more, I'll be able to talk more about that. And a big issue that a lot of people have with this knife is that there is not much lock bar access. But you guys were telling me in my first impressions video that Gayle Bradley actually designed this knife specifically not to have very good lock bar access, because he says that when you hard use your knife and are gripping it very hard, there is the chance that it could disengage on you. Now, personally, for me, I have never had that problem. I don't think I ever will have that problem. And I have gotten like a knife, hold up, give me a second. A knife like Civivi Shredder or something, and just kind of gripped it as hard as I could. And I don't really think that I can disengage this lock. I don't want to hit my finger, but it's one of those things where I don't think it's that big of a problem. But still, I personally like to see designers who really care about hard use knives. You know, personally, one thing that I like to look for in designs of knives, I like to look at something, you know, more than just a picture, more than just a CAD file or whatever. I like to see someone who actually uses their stuff, who actually knows what works and what doesn't. And I feel like Gayle Bradley is definitely one of those people. So even though I wish there was more lock bar access, it's one of those things where after I heard that, it made me a little bit happier, and it made me not really dislike it all that much. And it's one of those things where this is a knife that I have not been playing with at all. It's been a knife that I get out maybe 10, 20 times a day, open it, do my cut, close it like that. And when you do that, your thumb does not really feel it at all. Now, if I'm just sitting on the couch, flicking it open and close, open and close, it will wear down the skin on your thumb. But one thing you can do if you're trying to prevent that is you can get it like this and do kind of the Medford style of thing. What I do is I put my fingernail in that liner lock and then go like that. It's a little bit difficult because I have a pretty short fingernail. But anyway, it's one of those things where that is a much more comfortable way of closing it. But if I'm just using it, I can just do that and close it with my thumb. And while it's not the most comfortable thing, it is still functional and it works. So onto the ergonomics of this knife, and I really do like these ergos. You know, when you look at it, it's one of those things where the ergonomic lines don't look that simple, partially because this dip down here and the incline right there. But it's one of those things where they are pretty simple, because look at how kind of shallow, I guess I could say, that finger groove is. And it's one of those things where, because there isn't a bunch of lock bar access, it does make the ergonomic lines a lot more subtle. And it's one of those knives where, even though I never use this grip, I can grip it like this and it's almost just as comfortable as gripping it like this, like no hot spots at all. So it is very comfortable in my hand. And the only uncomfort I've had with this knife is, you know, maybe a couple times I've gripped it weirder than normal and done a harder use cut, and then I kind of feel the pocket clip a bit, but I really have had no issues with the clip, and I don't feel it at all. And just a basic hammer grip, saber grip, and things like that. And this dip right here, it is very comfortable in your hand when you're holding it like this. But one thing when it comes to hard use is that it puts pressure in a specific spot. So one test that I do with my knives, kind of while using them, is I'll get like 3 or 4 layers of cardboard and just do a hammer grip and try and move through them and see if I actually can cut them, and how comfortable it is. And what happens is that blade is pushing up. The cardboard is pushing the blade up this way while you are pushing your hand down this way. And so what happens is that blade is coming up and your hand is pushing it down. So it is creating a pressure point right there in your hand. I hope you guys can see that and understand that pretty well. And what that does is, over time, it will create some uncomfort. Now for me, it was just a little thing, and after I did the cut, it was all fine. But it's one of those things where, let's say you are an extreme hard user who is doing tons of cuts like this, that might pose an issue in the future, but I highly doubt that that would, when there probably are a lot of other knives that you would use that aren't as comfortable as this one. And if you want to look at a good example, I know I don't want to make this a Spyderco video, but as you can see, this straight back here, and what it does is it puts the pressure throughout your whole hand and not in one specific spot in use. So now one more thing about ergos that I just really appreciate, this jimping right here. Like, it is still kind of rough, but it's just not very much jimping at all, and it actually is very functional in this saber grip. And it's one of those things that I really like, the jimping, and they don't need to do jimping from here all the way to the top of that thumb hole area like they do on the PM2. That just is a little bit too sharp. So I really do like that jimping. I think that they did a great job. I personally don't really think jimping is all that necessary on knives, but I can appreciate when a knife does it right. And I feel like that was probably Gayle Bradley. I bet he had some influence on that when talking with Spyderco, because, you know, I bet Spyderco would like to do their normal jimping all up here. And if you guys know me, you know I really like to do this pinch grip, and I guess a complaint with ergonomics could be that I wish this choil was just barely extended a little bit more so that I could put my middle finger where my pointer finger goes and almost use this as a small choil for cuts like this. And I can, it's just I'm a little too close to the blade, a little too close for comfort. But, you know, bringing out the Spyderco again, I don't mean to make this a comparison. This little choil right here works very well for cuts like this, and it's just very useful. So I guess that's a complaint, but I can always just scoot back on the knife and do it like this. For the next category, I'm going to be talking about the carry of this knife, and this is heavier than your average Spyderco. Let me check and see if there is internal milling. Yeah, there is some skeleton holes, I guess, or skeletonization, I guess is the proper term. But this knife, I believe I looked it up on Blade HQ, and it's like 4.4 ounces, which a lot of times you'll see Spyderco they're really good at making their knives light. For example, the Millie is like in the 3-ounce mark, which is crazy for how big that knife is. But this one is a little bit on the chunky side. But what I'm trying to say is that this knives that are heavier really do feel good in your hand when using them, because I think the balance is like, yeah, it's a little bit farther back. But one thing I've noticed that a farther back balance makes the knife feel a little bit more robust in your hand when holding it like this, and you still have some more control over it. I guess it's one of those things where even though the balance point's a little bit farther back than normal, it's one of those things where I think that it feels good in my hand. Oh yeah, I was talking about carry. Sorry about that. So this clip right here, it does carry fine. I really have no complaints. Just looking at it, it doesn't look to have as much ramp as the regular Spyderco clip. I have an MXG gear clip, or no, a Lynch Northwest clip on my PM2, so I can't really compare them. But I do have to use 2 hands when putting it in and out of my pocket. It's one of those things where that doesn't affect me that much, but it might affect you. You know, maybe if you have 1 arm or something, I don't really know. But it's one of those things where I will hold my pocket and then put the knife in. Do I want to do that? No, but I'm willing to do it because overall, I don't really have many complaints with the carry. And a lot of people are going to want to put deep carry clips on this. I don't really have an issue with it. It gives me a little bit to grab onto, and I'm perfectly fine with that. Also, you can put it tip down left-handed, so I plan on doing that in the future. Oh, that'd make people so mad. I kind of just want to take my PM2, take this clip off, and put a Lynch clip tip down left-handed. Hooey, that'll make them fanboys mad. But anyway, on to the action of this knife. So a complaint with the action that I've heard is that the detent is a little light, and I will admit that it is. Let me show you here. So that detent is a little bit lighter than a detent like you'd see on a normal Spyderco. Sorry, I'm having trouble getting it out like this. So yes, this is a lighter detent, and what happens is that a lot of times you will flick it out. Oh wait, I actually did it there. You'll flick it out and it just won't go all the way. So you kind of have to think about it. You're like, all right, more force with my thumb, more wrist or whatever. And so even though a lot of people aren't going to like that because it's not like your average Spyderco action, what I like is that it's very easy to do a thumb roll. Like, look at this. It's almost like zero transition from breaking that detent, and it's just very nice. And it also reminds me a lot of a Sebenza. And so look at this Sage 5. This is a very kind of a flicky action, you know, flick out, drop shut. And it's one of those things where I can thumb roll it like this, but there is a little bit of a step and there's a noticeable transition. It's not much, but sometimes I feel like I got to go fast in order to actually do it. And so that's why I kind of like the softer detent on the GB2. And I think that thumb stud knives and thumb hole knives really perform well with soft detents. That's why you see the thumb stud axis lock combo very frequently on Benchmade knives and Hogue knives like this, because axis locks, even though there's that little bit of tension from the Omega spring right there, they have pretty weak detents. Like almost every axis lock I have, I can just shake out like that. But what it does is it makes it a very easy thumb roller, which I think works very well for thumb stud and thumb hole knives. And also this runs on phosphor bronze washers. So finally, for the value, the very last part of this review, this knife, like I said before, comes in at $170. And in my opinion, that is an excellent price point. The amount of comfort you're going to get in hand with this, the great blade geometry, the M4 steel, the very solid lockup for me. And yes, there is that problem with the lock bar access, but I mean, the designer designed it that way. And so you can either do the mod where you kind of Dremel out that extra shadow box liner on this show side scale, or what you could do is just leave it like that and just make this knife a hard user that you're going to use a lot. And that's what I kind of did with it. And so overall, this knife, I think it's worth the price. And I personally think that that's a great deal for $170 because, I don't know, like the PM2 is kind of creeping towards that price, just the basic S30V one. If I had to guess, I'd say it's $150 or $160. But with this one, you're getting M4 and a very sturdy knife and a very good blade shape with an excellent hollow grind that is ground extremely thin behind the edge. So that's going to do it for the video. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If you have anything you want to say about the knife or anything about the review, I don't know, just leave it in the comment section. I'd love to talk with you. But that's going to do it for the video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.